So our next speaker is also somebody I've known for quite some time, and interestingly enough, lives relatively close to me in the Midwest of the United States, so I consider him kind of a geographically friend as well as Twitter friend and Kaggle friend. Boyan is a machine learning modeler at NVIDIA. He holds a PhD in theoretical physics and has been working in machine learning and data science for 7 years, where he's worked on real-world fintech problem. He's one of 5 quadruple grandmasters at Kaggle. We call them great grandmasters. And he's the first person to reach the top 10 in all 4 categories simultaneously. He has 9 Kaggle competition gold medals, where his team won the largest competition at the time, the Home Credit Classification Challenge. He's worked as a competition participant and organizer in the Human Protein Classification Challenge and mRNA Open Vaccine Challenge. Has been part of a distinct Nature publication. By the way, that mRNA challenge that we hosted on Kaggle is one that we're very, very proud of. We love when Kaggle is able to do things that contribute to the health and well-being of people around the globe. Boyan considers himself a machine learning generalist and has considerable experience with a wide variety of machine learning problems: image, NLP, voice, tabular, etc. He is passionate about learning and exploring new applications of machine learning, especially those that have significant impact on real-world problems. He's currently working on application of machine learning in RNA bioinformatics and in social media analysis. He's particularly interested in the fundamentals of machine learning for tabular data. Boyan is a voracious reader. He is passionate about using all sorts of tools and gadgets, loves digital photography, and enjoys hiking in the woods. Boyan is happily married and lives with his wife and 3 children in Indiana, which is just a couple of states away from me. So, Boyan.
Thank you, Walter. You know, I actually have a small little vignette about how distances in Europe and US are kind of different. You know, in the US, when you have to, you know, drive to your mailbox as opposed to just walking down the street, and in the US, commuting to work for 200 miles is considered normal, while here it's like 3 states away. So, you know, these are kind of very different distance scales. But anyways, so today my presentation is going to be about a task with generative AI. It's actually going to be pretty low-key presentation, not technically demanding. I will present a survey of a recent progress in AI, for especially generative AI in the business context. So this is one of the hottest fields right now. People are really excited about it. And things are developing really, really fast, so fast that, in fact, I had to include several additional things since I started making this slide presentation just a few weeks ago. So I'm going to introduce generative AI, explain what it is, how it relates to other forms of AI. Then I'll switch to several particular use cases in marketing and advertising, which may be very relevant to people in this room, content and SEO, spreadsheets, information, design, and finally generating code. So these are in a kind of order of difficulty, maybe, how they're used. But the idea is behind this presentation to just show you how the recent very advanced progress in AI can actually have impact on people who are necessarily not machine learning experts or not even data scientists, but actually use several different tools in the business context. So here's one kind of classification of various versions of ML or AI, and I kind of go back and forth between ML and AI because well, for people in this room, we all know it's really machine learning, but other people would like to use AI, and for all sorts of marketing reasons, it's a preferred term. But we usually split it in supervised machine learning, which is machine learning when you're given some kind of target, some kind of things to predict. So you have the labels for your data, and you're trying to predict that. Unsupervised machine learning is machine learning where you don't have particular labels for your data, and you're trying to get some kind of information out of it. And then we have generative ML AI, which is a machine learning that uses data sets to generate a new kind of similar kind of data, which is sort of distinct from the other 2 groups. But most of these classifications are done more for like convenience rather than there's some kind of fundamental difference between them, and there's a lot of overlap between different groups. So first, I'm going to give you a brief overview of generative AI, how it came about, how is it different from other versions, and what are the main flavors of generative AI. So one thing that generative AI does, it can use both unsupervised and semi-supervised learning to create new content. Like all ML, it needs to have a lot of data to actually work, and this is how generative AI is different from other versions of generative tools. For a situation where we either have physical laws or something else that we can use, we can synthesize data based on those laws. For instance, if you're running a flight simulation, you can synthesize your environment around you, or if you're doing some kind of molecular modeling, you have laws of physics that can help you kind of simulate these things. But in case of generative AI, you actually use the statistical properties of the data itself to generate more data sets. So it's qualitatively different. Again, my slides are cut off from other versions of the AI that are sort of discriminatory. Discriminatory not in the sense that that there's some kind of bias there, but discriminatory making decision based on AI or machine learning that you use. So here's the main kinds of content generation with AI. We have human understandable content, which is images, video, and audio text. Okay, so this is a kind of AI that generative content that we really easily recognize. It's a very easily recognizable as something novel. But every time, so like an example of that, every time you talk to Siri or Alexa, when she responds to you, it's really a generative text or generative sound or voice that she's using, and so you have direct daily experiences with generative AI. Finally, third bullet point right here. There's other kinds of generative process. So pretty much every time you create synthetic data in machine learning context, you are using some kind of generative AI. So we can use GPT-3 to generate the next bullet point, I think, which is going to be one of my slides. So this is the slide. This is the third bullet point. So apparently there's a discriminatory ML, which is a ML that we talk about when we actually try to make decisions based on the output of the ML. So what are the main, so this is the third one. So generative AI is crucial for almost any synthetic data set generation, especially for the kinds that I mentioned in the first bullet point, but even when Kaggle is running their Tabula Playground series, that's what they're using generative AI to create new data sets. So what are main kinds of generative AI? And again, this is not really firm distinction between these 5 bullet points. It's mostly what people are using these days. There's a lot of overlap, and many of these are kind of dependent on the previous bullet points. So we have GANs, large language models, GPT-3, which is a particular kind of large language model, DALL-E 2, and stable diffusion. So these are mostly flavors of generative AI behind tools that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm just going to briefly explain what each one of these is. So GANs are the first ones to kind of come on the scene. They were introduced by Ian Goodfellow back in 2014. They pretty much held sway for many years as the main tools for generating AI content. So the idea is to generate the same data set with the characteristics of the original data set content. There's an indirect training using discriminators to try, create a special little sub-neural network that's trying to figure out if what you're creating is really real or created. So these GANs were used for many years, created some interesting content, but you could always tell this is like really primitive. It's not really anything that could fool anyone, especially not humans. Then for years, we've been getting these large language models that were getting larger and larger. Prior to large language models, we did have word-to-vec and other kind of embeddings that were very simple ways of thinking about vectorizing text. But then with the rise of transformers in 2017, it became possible to use bigger and bigger models to actually create text. And these large language models are just growing exponentially with 10x growth almost every year over year, and pretty much no sign of slowing down. And then one of the great things about these large language models is they're very plastic. They can be used for all sorts of different tasks, not just predicting things, but for translation, text summarization, text classification, text generation, and then using text to actually generate images, which is something that I'm going to show you in a little bit. And then particular kind of large language model is a GPT series of models. The GPT-3 is the current one that's been introduced in 2020 by OpenAI. Initially, they were very reluctant to actually even give access to most people, supposedly because of all sorts of unintended uses that could generate. But since then, they've actually allowed access. What I've heard right now, they gave Microsoft exclusive access to the actual models and the weights, but API remains open to the public if you pay for it. So it's a particularly large transformer-based architecture, which takes a 2048 tokens, and has 175 billion parameters. It generates really high-quality text, often hard to distinguish from other texts. And these models keep growing. I think that soon enough they will reach almost a trillion parameters if it hasn't been surpassed, depending how you count. And I've heard that the GPT-4 is going to come early next year. So that, this is the rumor on the street, what people are talking about. And then DALL-E, the first DALL-E came around a couple of years ago, and there was this famous image of astronaut riding a horse on a moon, which was very incredible. That this is the reason why that was so incredible is because astronauts don't ride horses on the moon. So this was a completely new, novel situation. That's something that has never been done. There was no image of that, but they were able to create that. But it still was not very high quality image. You could still see a lot of artifacts in the image. But the recent versions of DALL-E and similar models have actually really improved. And this is, for instance, output of one of the recent DALL-E search queries, essentially a monkey in an astronaut suit. So idea behind DALL-E and similar models is to swap text for pixels. And then you can use those similar large language models similarly to the way you would generate text, but just instead of text, you actually have images. So there are, of course, a lot of technical details that are being left out, but this is the main idea. And then the final one that is becoming very popular these days, mostly because the authors release both the weights and a code, is a stable diffusion that was released just a few months ago. It uses latent diffusion models. There's a kind of essentially very fancy Markov chains. It's been done by this new startup, Stability AI, that just raised over $100 million just a few weeks ago, and in collaboration with CompViz and LLMU and Runway. So these are the main flavors of generative models that are being used behind all the apps that I will be showing to you now. And what's really remarkable about this generative AI is how quickly the turnaround from proof of concept, people are creating some of these models, to actually people using them for real world impact. So it's a really crazy. Like DALL-E 2 came out, I think, in April, and it's already been pretty much incorporated in so many different apps. So I will showcase some of these latest applications, and I will just make disclaimers. I'm not shilling for any of them. None of them pay me any money for them. I made this a presentation in collaboration with lore.com, which is a newsletter that specializes in bringing up some of these applications to the public's notice. And I'm not affiliated with any of the companies featured in the slides, and I have actually not even used them as a customer. So this is purely me enjoying what someone else is working on and trying to kind of showcase what's possible and possibly what's coming next. So here we go. AI-enabled business automation. So it's a new era. We are becoming much more, there's much more investment. It's a very fast-growing area. AI software is growing 50% faster than overall software, all of the software together, and it's probably going to be growing even faster, especially now that all the crypto is out of running, so all the VC money has to go somewhere, and this is the most logical place to go. So what are the real-world applications? So we're going to start with few. You have applications in marketing and advertising, which is sort of very natural that you would have for something that's generating images. But you also have a very good applications for content and even SEO, so optimizing websites or optimizing any kind of content online for the web, for search engines. What's really kind of tickled my fancy are the few uses in spreadsheets, especially even for presentations. So there are a few very recent developments there that are just kind of days, if not weeks old. So let's start with marketing and advertising. Again, this image here is completely generated using generative AI. You can still, especially on a large screen like this, see some artifacts, but overall visual is pretty stunning. And if you think of it as a stylistic image, it can definitely be used in all sorts of copies for advertising. So you can use it for ad creation, ad optimization, looking at how to optimize ads for your organization, how to promote yourself on social media, and social media is just growing; it's not going anywhere, despite all these recent setbacks and a lot of bad publicity. But it's the way that people communicating nowadays. It's not going to change. It's where people find each other. It's where people find content nowadays. So it's one of the main reasons why you kind of want to be active on social media in terms of these things. And the thing with social media, it's very rapid turn cycles. You cannot have marketing campaigns that are weeks or months old. You kind of have to do things on the spot and act on your feet. So having a marketing campaign that takes too long to come to fruition can be a liability. So using something like generative AI can be a very good solution in that case. So here's one particular company, Lexica Art, which I just came across last week. The CEO of the company was showcasing some models that he was creating. I got in touch with him. I said, hey, I'm going to this Louis Vuitton conference in Paris. Could you make me some Louis Vuitton models? And he said, sure. And just a couple of hours later, he sent me these images. So these are all computer AI generated. It's kind of quite remarkable, if you ask me. So as I try to point out, just like with everything else, humans are not going away. You're still going to have models. You're still going to have photographers. But if you're trying to, if you're coming up with a new style for Louis Vuitton and you want to see what it would be like on a runway, this is one way to kind of test your ideas. So you can already do this, right now. It will become even more interesting when you can actually create motion and video models, and that's coming, if not already here in a few months. So there's a company called Jasper that uses AI for ad creation. You can actually create some headline or some primary text, and using GPT-3 or similar fancy things can create very interesting ad copies. So now it's for tweets, and again, I have to make a disclaimer. I'm not using this. All my tweets are organic. But if you again want to create some interesting content and you don't have time and you don't want to bother and you don't want to hire a ghost tweeter, you can jump into one of these apps, create some ideas for what you want to talk about, and just create apps. There's much more to a good tweet than just good content, but you will definitely have to have some good content in order to create a good tweet. All right, sorry. Yes. So there are a lot of obvious benefits. It lowers ad creation cost. It really speeds up cycle of creating ads and getting feedback on them. Much faster time to market, and you can use to grow your social media just using some of these tools. Now, content and SEO. So this is now becoming a state industry. Used to be the cutting edge, but it's still true. The old saying that the content is king, and you can create much faster content and much better content, like blog posts, infographics, or video for your organization using some of these generative AI tools. Let's see how we're doing. All right. So here are some main companies in this place. I've already showed some Jasper that's raised $131 million, Runway and Copy AI. So, these are companies that are coming online within just like last few months, a few weeks, that are kind of really having an impact, that are coming out with products that can be used directly for any, all sorts of business use cases. Most of these are content and SEO sites. For instance, Jasper is there to create blog posts. All right, so this is a cute little demonstration, not really. This is the old blog writing, slow and staid and uninspired. And then you can have a much faster blog writing using automated tools. You don't have to write a whole blog post using all these tools, but it can definitely help with speeding up the process or giving you ideas for what to write. Then you can use generative AI for creating infographics. So this is again, you can see that the text is completely off, but the general outlines are very, very convincing. So you can have a nice infographics. You're creating your next Kaggle days, I don't know, Indiana, coming in the spring next year. So this could be used to create ads or create infographics for your conference. Okay. So anyways, this slide was about video editing on the fly, where you could actually erase and replace objects in the video, but it's not working now, so we have to do next one. So again, benefits of generative AI in this case is to create 3 to 5 times faster content, reduce content cost, and smart SEO optimization. Now spreadsheets. I don't know if this one's going to work either. No. Okay. So we have information. So we have a summarization, presentation, and brainstorming. Here, okay, good. This one's working. So this one, you can take different kind of. So a lot of communications in corporations is still spread across the different communications channels. It's very hard to find, and even harder to make searchable and accessible. So there's a way to actually find a Slack presentation, get a link to it, summarize it, and then you can maybe store it on some separate server where people can actually find it and easily find it. So this is a text summarization that is another useful tool for this use case. Now presentation, let's see. Okay, this one maybe works, maybe doesn't. Gladia, again, another company that I just came across over the last couple of weeks. They're doing, they're making tools for turning any kind of text or any kind of combination of text, images, and whatnot into presentations. So, for next Kaggle days, I wouldn't have to worry about these things. I would just use AI to actually generate the whole thing and just kind of send it to you, and maybe have a little avatar that shows up on the screen and actually present it. So it's all these tools are standard business stack tools that people are familiar with. And what I feel is very exciting about this particular wave of machine learning AI is finally some of the premises of automation are coming to everyday business users that can be very accessible. So people without any kind of special skills can actually use them. Here's another similar tool that you can actually brainstorm. You have, I usually don't brainstorm, but people who do can actually use this. You have one idea and then generate more ideas like this just using GPT-3. Again, save time and money. It's more efficient communication and move faster. So for design, obvious use cases, logos, illustrations, web design. Say you're starting a startup, you want to be a solopreneur, you don't want to spend too much money on some professional logos. You give GPT some ideas and come up with these things, and you're all set. Here's some nice illustrations that can be used either for your startup or some kind of art project that you're running. Website design. Again, very professionally looking websites are already possible to create using generative AI, and more interesting stuff is coming down the road. So main a benefit of all automation and this generative automation in particular is that it allows you for much faster iteration. Faster iteration can lead to better ideas. Better ideas can lead to better products, and you can also spend less time and money on useless side projects. And then finally, we have generating code that I think most people are here familiar with. Code completion is one use case. Code summarization, where you can actually understand what the code is about, and creating entire applications using some of the code generation tools. So main competitors are GitHub and Replit, who are using their own creating new tools. So here's another example of how to actually take a piece of code and create some kind of code summarization, what the code is doing. That's a relatively simple task. You can actually also go in the opposite direction, where you tell applications what kind of code to create, and then creates it for you. So fewer engineers required, maybe not. If Elon is watching this, he was probably salivating. But I think that it will be more about engineering empowerment. I think, if anything, it will allow engineers to spend more time on the architecture of code and things that really matter, rather than kind of some nitty-gritty of mundane tasks that need to be done. And then faster time to market, you can create a much more efficient code that can be very useful in the real world. And then finally, reflections, future trends. As I mentioned earlier, GPT-4 is probably coming out next year. It will make this improvements 3 to 10 times more. I've been hearing from some people, it's just amazing. More blending of text and images generation, and there'll be bots that you think are human. You probably encountered some of those already. In 3 to 5 years, maybe someone can create one app for all of these use cases that you just uses all generative tools. There are few big name contenders, but I think that there's a chance for some low-level disruptors as well. What I'm really excited about, and I haven't really covered it in this presentation, is use of generative AI in education. I think that all the kids are learning a lot on their own. Mine are there. They're using Duolingo to learn French as we speak. But Duolingo and similar apps are still hard-coded. You have information, evaluation that's very predetermined. But if you could have like a very good educational apps that actually give you feedback on the fly based on a very particular things that you're learning, I think that's going to be revolutionary. And I think that companies don't adapt to this new reality will have a really hard time competing in the future, and may even face obsolescence. So the future is here. The companies that harness AI will be the leaders of tomorrow. And with that, I've finished this presentation, and all the companies mentioned in this can be found on the following website.
Thank you. Thank you, Boyan. That was absolutely incredible and fascinating. So we do have about 5 minutes for questions, Mammy.
So in the past couple months, we had issues with copyright, both with GitHub or Stable Diffusion, with artists saying that their data was stolen or doesn't respect the GPL copyright. Like, what's the state of this?
I think this will actually be very dependent on jurisdiction. In the US, Supreme Court has ruled that models trained on data are actually not subject to the copyright of the original data. So I think in the US has a particular way of answering that. I really don't know how it's going to affect other jurisdictions.
Hello, thank you for that great talk. I have a question regarding generating code. Is it related to program synthesis in any way?
Repeat the question, I didn't get it.
Is the generation of code related to program synthesis in any way?
So yeah, I think code will be part of programs that that you can create. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, for example, talking about the ARC challenge, I think you're aware of the ARC challenge. like it's a challenge where you have, for example, inputs in any kind of input, and you have to solve them. Like it's like puzzles, but you have to create, let's say, an agent that is able to solve them, and you have a bunch of them. So can code generation be related to program synthesis?
Could be. I know that there's a lot of work, and there's some very exciting research that's done by DeepMind for solving math problems. So like they would come up with proofs for math problems just given some kind of challenge that you're given. So I can imagine that this could be potentially related to that. So like given a challenge, can you create a program that can do this? My guess would be that this is still a little bit down the road. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this original presentation, not too technical, very use case oriented. So many companies, at least in the US, because all the examples you showed are from the US, are moving toward generative AI. Are there other companies that are moving through generative AI content detection? Because the problem will be the issue in the future. What is fake, what is not fake? That is the question.
Well, we have a deepfake world champion in this room, and Jiba, who won the competition for deepfake in Kaggle a year ago, was very, very shamefully disqualified from the first place. I'm not going to start yelling about it before, but yes, I think some of these things are, very easy to detect that it's a fake. You just by looking at some of these images, you can see it's wrong. So, but I think again, like it's an arms race. You create better fakes, and then someone come up with a better model to detect the fakes, and then whoever created those fakes is going to have to come up with the next best models. It's similar to, I think, how spam detectors work. So spam detectors are getting better and better, but then you have better spammers. Right now I've been getting notices that I've won some Walmart challenge as we speak, and even Google's spam detectors cannot get it. So I think it's never going to go away, but I think we will have to be more discerning ourselves. We have to realize that more and more content that before we took to be a human could potentially be created by bots. So I think that there will be a challenge for us individually, but I think machine learning tools themselves can be used to actually detect use better detection.
We'll take 2 more questions. So we'll get this one over here, and then on the other side, and then we'll finish up.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. Very fascinating stuff. So my question for you is, what's your opinion on open sourcing these kind of generative models versus keeping them closed sourced or providing them through an API from an ethical point of view?
It's challenging. I don't have the right answer. I think used properly, a lot of these models are very useful for all sorts of research. My other research, the actual research I do, one of the projects is working with Caltech's political science team, and we are using some of these language models for studying political polarization on the internet and trying to use them, and it's very valuable for those kind of projects. But yes, the potential for abuse is there. It's probably not going to go away. If anything, it's probably going to get worse. So I don't have the answer to that. I think from an ethical standpoint, it's a difficult issue. I think it's even more difficult issue actually from a practical standpoint, because as I mentioned, like these models are getting 10 times bigger year over year, and realistically, there are only very few organizations in the world that actually can make full use of them. So like that's a wholly different issue that we have to deal with. Yeah.
Hello, thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome.
And I wondered, do you think that if artists start to use these generative tools to generate further art, it could dry out truly new art and truly new styles, and in the end impact the training data that was used to create these models? And so we would stay in we would converge in like what we see today and it will never evolve? Do you see this as a risk?
I have some opinion. I have opinions about everything, but I have some opinions about this particular issue. Like I think in the short term, it could potentially actually help artists, and a similar thing that happened with when you got those superhuman chess robots. All of a sudden, all the chess players improved because they started practicing against superhuman chess robots. I think that artists themselves could become better artists. Now, what is a better artist? That's a much more fluid question than what is a better chess player, which is very kind of well defined. But I think in a foreseeable future, this could actually really both democratize art and actually make art much better. I think that there could be a lot of very interesting use cases that we're not even thinking about. I like to say that with almost every technology, it's the use case that you never think about that actually becomes the dominant. So something that we're not even thinking about right now could potentially be the main use for some of these generative models.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I have one follow-up question. So Boyan, this is the most important question of your presentation. If Kaggle were to host a competition related to generative AI, would you participate?
No.
Oh, well, okay, well, so that leaves,
That was easy.
That leaves the leaderboard open for everyone else. Let's thank Boyan one more time for his great presentation. Thank you so much. It was fantastic. And also,
I apologize once more for all the technical issues.
And I want to say thanks to the tech team who helped troubleshoot. It's never fun to have those tech issues. So thank you, Boyan, for working through those.